Talking to Dr. LMadu, and he's talking about the evolution of democracy in the Middle East, or the so-called Arab Spring. And Dr. Madu, before we had our first commercial break, you promised that you would give us some information in reference to the implication of some of these countries that have gone democratic during the so-called Arab Spring.
First of all, let's take Tunisia. Last year in October, after the elections, the Islamic Party of Monchef Mazouki, won the elections, and the fear of most people in Tunisia was that they're going to establish a theocratic state, ruled according to the Quran. But the president has come out and said no. We are going to leave things the way they were. Tunisia is a secular state, and we're going to run a secular state. We don't want to chase away tourists, because the tourists have already started, getting afraid if they're going to ban people from swimming on the beaches, and it. Christians have already gotten scared, if they're going to lose, their liquor licenses and all those. But the government has said, no, we're not going to do all that in the interest of our economy, because if we chase tourists out, the economy will go down, and there'll be nothing to govern. So they're sensible enough to understand that for them to survive and run the country efficiently, they have to run it as a secular state. Introducing an Islamic state will be counterproductive to the economy. Now in Egypt, an Islamist party also won, under Mohamed Morsi, who is an American-educated PhD holder. Now Morsi has distanced himself from this, from the Muslim Brotherhood. He resigned his membership after he became president, saying, well, I'm going to be president of everybody, Christians and Muslims and women, and it. Now, prior to his election, the Constitutional Court that was appointed by Mubarak, dissolved parliament that was filled with members of Mohamed Morsi's party. Now, the army also came and subscribed his powers, saying, well, you can be president, but we don't want you to mess around with foreign policy or defense policy. We'll keep that to ourselves. Now, when Morsi came in, the first thing he did was, call parliament back into session for a few minutes just to challenge the army. Okay, so that happened. Right now, he is involved in a tussle with the army for power. Now, people will say, well, the army is trying to grab power and keep power, and keep Morsi out of power. What I see is this. The army is trying to play the same role the army plays in Turkey's elections. Because since Kemal Atatürk, who was they call him the founder of modern Turkey, decreed that Turkey must be a secular state, and that the army should be the guarantor of that secular state, the army always played a strong role in the political affairs of Turkey. So I suppose the SCAF, that's the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces in Egypt, under General Tantawi, wants to play that similar role, to be a guarantor
in Egypt
of secularism in Egypt, to make sure Mohamed Morsi doesn't move the country into a theocratic state, run by the Muslim Brotherhood. I think that's what they're trying to play, to make sure, he's the president of everybody. Because if Egypt becomes an Islamic republic, tourism is going to dry up. The economy is going to go down. Christians already started getting afraid they will leave the country. So the SCAF wants to make sure the army, that Morsi runs Egypt as a secular state. And you should remember, Morsi's election is historic, not just because it's the first really free democratic election in Egyptian history, but it's the first time a real civilian has run Egypt since 1952. Nasser was a soldier. Sadat was a soldier. Mubarak was a soldier. Okay, so the three rulers of Egypt have been soldiers. So this is the first time you have a real civilian. But the army wants to make sure that country remains a secular state. Moreover, there's a big threat, economic threat to the army. The Egyptian army receives billions of dollars from the United States government every year. And the army understands that if Egypt was to move towards being an Islamic republic, that money is going to go. It will dry up. That's exactly one of the reasons why they feel threatened by any untoward, move towards an Islamic republic. And the U.S. has made it clear, Ms. Clinton visited a few weeks ago, that they want Morsi to be the president of everybody and guarantee equal rights for Christians and women. That was clear. So the army in Egypt wants to play that same role that the Turkish army plays. Turkey is run by an Islamist party under, Erdogan. But Erdogan understands he can move, too far.
Without the army.
Exactly, and the army is going to stop him if he moves too much to become an Islamic party. Okay, so it's the same role the armed forces in Egypt is trying to play. Now in Libya, the elections that were just held, the liberal party won under Mahmoud Jibril, who is currently the prime minister. The Libyan election is unique in a way because the Islamists did not have any role to play. The Libyans rejected Islamic parties, not because they don't like them, but because the Islamic parties did not play any role in the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi. And the elections in Libya also, unlike the elections in Egypt and Tunisia, was more ethnic and tribally based, the voting pattern. Because Libya is still, kind of balkanized into East and West, and then the ethnic groups too. So the election really was held on those bases. But I'm sure the U.S. is glad the Liberal Party won under Mahmoud Jibril, who is also an educated, American educated also. So that's very significant and important. 60% of the 2.8 million registered voters in Libya participated in the elections. Now in Yemen is very significant here in view of what is happening in Syria. Now, one way I think, Assad might be willing to step down is to use the Yemen solution. What happened in Yemen, after months of fighting, is that there was an agreement that President Ali Abdullah Saleh, will step down. He will be given blanket immunity from prosecution. The same with his entire family and close associates, and he will be allowed to stay in the country. That's why he agreed to step down, and his vice president took over.
Very good. And of course, Dr. LMadu, this would be an excellent place to stop for this second commercial break, because I think that we can come back and deal with Yemen, but at the same time, you've already mentioned Syria, and you're talking about some of the possibilities of perhaps ending this stalemate that we face with Syria, as well as the killing that's going on. And of course, we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break.